The first blow didn't come from a fist. It came from a voice, from someone who had grown up under the same roof as me, who once held my hand in family photographs, who had eaten from the same steaming pots of rice and stew I used to cook years ago. The words weren't yelled. No, they were delivered with a smile, as if raising a glass to honor me. Yet every syllable felt dipped in venom. "You're finished? You have nothing left." The glass caught the faint flicker of the chandelier overhead, amber liquid briefly glowing like melted gold. That whisper of light broke across the rim, and then darkness took it back. All around me, the room fell into a hush that seemed heavier than silence itself. The storm outside had been whispering all evening, but just then, rain lashed hard against the wide windows of the dining room. Thunder rolled slowly, low and distant, like something old waking up in the hills beyond. Candlelight shivered across the tablecloth, as if it too recoiled at those words. I didn't answer. I didn't rise. I didn't argue. I sat with my back straight, my hands resting calmly on either side of the white porcelain plate in front of me. The cake, 2 tiers crowned with glossy icing and 12 flickering candles, still stood untouched, waiting at the end of the table. But the sweet scent of sugar had already turned sour in the air. The burnt edge of wax stung my nose more than the frosting charmed it. And then came the small sounds. Silverware, glass stems clicking, chairs rustling, feet dragging with unease, as if no one at that moment wanted the floor to remember they were present. Some eyes stayed on the table, some glanced sideways with shallow pity. Others darted quick to the betrayer, eager to echo their smirk. I studied them all without moving my face. Their eyes, their shoulders, their fidgeting fingers. Who reveled? Who cringed? Who stayed neutral, clinging to cowardice like a lifeboat? I measured them all quietly, etching their betrayals not in anger, but in memory. I knew the storm had only just begun. The chandelier above us hummed softly, electricity struggling, 4 bulbs alive, 2 burned out, shadows thrown uneven against the old wallpaper. Those shadows crawled across our faces, elongating features, twisting smiles into sneers, hollowing eye sockets like skulls. The room had taken a shape of theater, and I sat center stage, an unwilling actor. My sibling raised the glass higher, their face painted with triumph disguised as warmth. The thin stem trembled just slightly, perhaps from the storm rumbling against the windows, or perhaps from greed pressing too quickly through their veins. "To my dear sibling," they mocked cheerfully, finally laying down the crown. "To the end of your chapter." The words broke into muted laughter, not from everyone, but from enough. The air thickened like smoke without fire. Every sound felt amplified. The tick of my watch in my coat pocket, the faint drip of rain, tracing down glass, the low grumble of my own calm breath. Inside, something had gone very still. Across the long mahogany table sat the wrapped gift, alone, heavy. A clean square object wrapped in deep navy paper, the bow tied tight, its metallic shimmer catching the faint flame of trembling candles. Everyone else's gifts had been opened earlier in the evening, tie pins, a bottle of half-hearted whiskey, trinkets too small to matter. This one, though, this one sat waiting, unbothered by laughter, patient. Like me, I did not touch it yet, and next to the gift, resting close to my hand, lay a silver pocket watch. My grandfather's. The ticking was almost soft enough to be missed, but in the thickening silence, it pulsed like a second heart. Its glass face reflected lightning bursts breaking through storm clouds outside. Every time I looked at it, I remembered time belonged to me, not them. Still, I said nothing. I watched. Mother glanced at me once, quickly, then lowered her eyes. Father stared into his glass as if the amber within might shield him. Cousins whispered behind hands, half-concealed grins slipping through fingers. Then, that same sibling leaned forward, grin wide, pressing brutal sweetness into the words. "You see, everyone agrees it's over for you. You're too old to start again, too tired, too finished. Maybe it's time you stepped back, for good." A laugh rolled down the table, weak but sharp enough to cut. I breathed once, twice, slow, every inhale deliberate, every exhale calmer than any shouting could ever sound. Outwardly, nothing betrayed me. Inside, though, the storm outside had found a mirror, a pressure gathering, patient in its thunder. I looked at their hands, greedy, rings heavier than fingers. I saw the tremor at the knuckles. I saw the hunger sitting in their eyes, the desperate way mockery became their shield. They thought me diminished. They thought me finished. But weak men often deliver their verdicts too soon. So, I let their words hang like damp clothes in winter air. Heavy, unpleasant, but harmless with time. I let the laughter fade, let silver forks scratch porcelain softly like whispers of bones against stone. And I let the silence after linger, with me in the center, not broken, not bowed. The candles had begun to sink down to their waxy graves, flames shrinking, curling into smoke. One hissed out completely, leaving a thin wisp twisting upward. The scent of extinguished light filled the heavy air. I shifted only once. My hand brushed lightly against the silver watch. Cold metal to warm skin, the tick alive against my palm. I placed it gently back down beside the waiting gift, aligning it with deliberate precision. Their eyes flicked toward me, waiting for eruption, thirsting for collapse. None came. Instead, I lifted my gaze slowly, scanning those faces one by one, the triumphant, the fearful, the indifferent. And in a voice low enough to nearly hide beneath the storm outside, but clear, enough to carry, I whispered inside myself what I knew to be true. They thought this was the end of me. I looked once more at the waiting box, its bow untouched, its secret intact. But none of them knew what was inside. Not the box, not my silence. Thunder cracked open the sky as if nature wanted to punctuate my thought. Glass rattled faint in frames, shadows lurched, everyone stiffened momentarily. I did not move. I let the storm speak for me, and beneath it all, beneath the burnt wax, the spoiled laughter, the clink of cowardly glasses, I felt the calm thrum of inevitability. The gift sat waiting on the table, and so was I. They had no idea what was coming. The smoke from the last candle curled upward, its gray trail bending and dissolving into the ceiling like a path to another time. My eyes lingered on it, not because of fascination with the dying flame, but because memory has a way of following smoke. Wherever it drifts, so do the past years, pulled out of hiding, stirred loose by the faintest spark. And as I sat there with laughter and contempt still ringing faintly in the dining room around me, the storm outside became something else. It was not just tonight's rain. No, it was every storm I had walked through years ago, when the water soaked into my clothes and my shoes never dried before the next day began. It was the smell of damp wool from old jackets, the sting of wet socks against numb toes. The present storm tapped the window, but my mind walked right back into the storms of my youth. I remembered those nights when the street lamps flickered weakly against sheets of water, and I trudged home from 2 separate jobs. One ended past midnight, sweeping floors still sticky from spilled liquor and cigarette ash. The other began at dawn, hauling heavy crates for a business that wasn't mine, though I made it function as if it were. I would enter the house quietly, careful not to wake anyone. My family slept sound, wrapped in warmth that my calloused hands had paid for. Sleep for me was never more than an interlude, 2, maybe 3 hours at most, before the alarm clattered, cruel and uncaring, on the rickety bedside table. Yet I obeyed it every morning because their comfort had become my duty. I can still smell the remnants of those mornings even now. Tea brewed too strong, leaves boiled until the water tasted bitter, a pan sizzling with onions, the sharp tang cutting into the stale air of a tired kitchen. I would cook meals in silence, my hands moving by routine, while my eyes burned from sleeplessness. And when at last they woke, yawning and stretching, they often didn't look at the table where the food waited as though it appeared by magic. They sat, they ate, they chatted idly between mouthfuls, never noticing the exhaustion in my eyes, nor the way my hands trembled slightly around the cup I refused to lift for myself. It was always about them first. Always. I remember one particular winter. The draft came cruelly through the broken frame of the back door, and my thin sweater was no shield. My fingers were raw, cracked from the cold. Yet the soup pot bubbled steadily because I would not let the house grow quiet with hunger. One sibling complained even then, the broth too salty, the bread too dry. They didn't notice the blood on my knuckle where I had slipped against the knife. I bandaged it in silence. And yet, I smiled. I told myself this was what sacrifice meant. That family justified every wound and every deprivation. Birthdays were the hardest, not theirs, mine. I had stopped celebrating my own long before that night in the dining room. My cakes, on the rare occasions they existed, were small, modest things, usually baked by me. Sometimes the candles were just reused from past celebrations, unevenly burning. I blew them out alone in the kitchen, the faint sweetness of frosted bread clinging to the air. But the laughter of others belonged in another room entirely. Their birthdays, though? Oh, those I worked overtime for. New shoes under wrapping paper, expensive guests entertained, meals spread so wide that the tablecloth sagged beneath the weight. When they smiled, I told myself that was enough. But memory can be cruel once it sours. When I look back now, I don't just see their joy. I see my absence. I see the hollow spaces in my own life where dreams once lived. There were times I could have traveled, invitations for schooling abroad that I quietly turned down, doctors warning about health I neglected, all set aside for them. And still, as years rolled on, gratitude never once made its home in that house. The signs of betrayal had been small at first, subtle and almost invisible if you wanted to believe in goodness. I had returned exhausted one evening after securing a crucial contract for our family business, one that kept the lights on and debts paid. And when I entered the room, I overheard it, my father's voice, steady and proud, declaring to outsiders how he alone had closed that deal, my sibling chiming in that they had guided the negotiations. My name was never spoken. I told myself it didn't matter, that recognition was nothing compared to stability. Yet deep within, a faint crack formed. A warning, more followed. A cousin once laughed lightly after I mentioned working late. "You act as if you're the savior of this family. Don't dramatize it," they had said. A dismissive chuckle, offered so casually, but it pierced like splinters. Another time, I fell ill. Fever high, lungs heavy with rattling cough. I stayed in bed, just one day. I hoped someone might bring tea to my weakening body, might set a plate by the bedside out of concern. But the hours passed. Laughter filled the house again. Nothing came. And when I dragged myself out to cook the evening meal, sitting at the table became their priority, not asking me how I stood upright with shaking knees. The unity I longed for appeared only when I filled their cups. When I was in need, silence lived among them. The fire in the living room burned bright many nights. Orange embers, warm glow, children sprawled on rugs, soft chatter echoing off the walls. But I remember sitting in the hallway then, patching torn clothes under weak yellow bulb light. Close enough to smell the pine wood from the fireplace, close enough to hear them enjoying the comfort of my toil, yet never close enough to be one of them. That is where nostalgia grows bitter. Sweet evenings curdle when you learn, too late, you were never part of the warmth you supplied. The storm outside my memory was endless. Nights soaked to the bone, shoes heavy with mud, and still I dragged my body through it to keep the wheel turning. The smell of damp coats clung to me everywhere, the scent of labor, of sacrifice. But the house carried only fresh bread and laughter built on my unspoken suffering. They never smelled the damp on me, never cared to wipe rain from my sleeve. Looking back now, it all seems foretold. Perhaps their cruelty on my birthday had been brewing for years, had been planted in every laugh that went unnoticed to me then, in every empty thank you never spoken aloud. Even then, though, there were tiny moments, ghosts of affection, that tricked me. A sibling hugging me on graduation, only to months later dismiss my unrealistic ambitions. Or a smile from mother when I handed her freshly ironed clothes, fading instantly when she remembered to scold me for folding them incorrectly. Love was always conditional. Affection masked as oversight. And still, I bent. And still, I gave. I realize now it wasn't loyalty. It was a bargain I made with myself. I traded my years for their comfort, believing someday respect or gratitude would arrive like a delayed letter. It never came. And as I sat at that birthday table in the present moment, hearing them finalize judgment over my life, I understood how deep my error had run. The rains of youth had blurred vision, but now clarity had arrived, sharp as lightning. I whispered inwardly, not for them to hear, but for myself. I gave them years they never valued. I carried weights they never acknowledged. My eyes returned to the gift still waiting, unopened beneath trembling candlelight of the present night. And now they think I have nothing left. I let that thought breathe, filling the room like smoke, unseen yet undeniable. But inside me, within the quiet landscape of my restraint, another truth had begun to pulse, steady and deliberate. Something was coming, something they could never predict. The moment was meant to celebrate me, or so they claimed. The table was long, polished mahogany, its surface cluttered with silver and porcelain, with crystal stems reflecting trembling candlelight. Beside every plate stood a glass of champagne, pale gold, fizzing faintly like nervous laughter hiding in the room. And then came the words, "Congratulations," my brother said, raising his glass with a crooked grin that was more cruelty than mirth. "Congratulations, you've lost everything." The room froze, except for the bubbles in his drink, rising, bursting, mocking. A hush pressed against the walls, thick enough to choke those unprepared for silence. I didn't move, I didn't blink. It struck me then how storms outside always choose such nights. A thunderclap split the distance, long and rolling, shaking the windows in their frames. A quick flash of light scattered shadows across the table. In that pale illumination, faces shifted, the smug, the pitying, the indifferent, all revealed. My fork had cooled in my hand. The metal no longer carried warmth from roast meat that had been served minutes before. Now it was just a weight, cold, blunt, strangely grounding. I set it down with care, the faint tap ringing louder than their whispers. My brother leaned back, satisfied that his dagger had found its place. His laughter, faint and sharp, broke the air like glass against stone. Others followed. A cousin chuckled, too eager to attach themselves to power. "Well, isn't that the truth?" they muttered, their tone oily, their mouth curled smugly, even as their eyes darted nervously, testing how far cruelty could be pushed. My father sat silent. His glass, half full, reflected candlelight darker than gold. He didn't look at me. He stared into the drink instead, like a man who hopes drowning inside amber will erase the shame he won't speak aloud. My mother's lips pressed thin, her posture rigid, but no defense came. No word fell from her tongue to cut through the venom. Silence, I have learned, betrays more deeply than daggers. I looked at them all, slowly, deliberately. Across the polished wood, my gift still sat, wrapped in navy paper, tied with its metallic ribbon, untouched as though it had no place among them. A silent observer, filled with weight they didn't even sense. It was as though it waited alongside me, patient, heavy, unseen. And the pocket watch in my jacket ticked with such persistence, I feared they might hear it. Its rhythm against my chest was too steady to belong to chance, as if counting how many seconds I could outlast their insults without rising. Then, his words pressed again. "You're finished," he said, a repeat meant to scar. "Cut off. Out. Everyone knows it. This is the end of your place in the family business, the end of your voice here. You don't belong at this table anymore." His glass rose like a commander's decree. Champagne sloshed, catching light like fleeting diamonds, sparkling while cutting like glass. The air grew taut. I heard the fizz hiss up the rim of his glass. I heard the rain hit window with more force, one droplet chasing another like a race of tears unwilling to stop. I replied, not loudly, not desperately, quiet, my words floating heavy. "Is that so?" 3 syllables only. Calm, almost a whisper. Not denial, not outrage, only stillness. They shifted, uncomfortable. Some leaned closer, eager for eruption. Others leaned back, fearful of collateral spray. They expected me to rise like thunder. They didn't know silence can be sharper than a storm. My cousin smirked. "Oh, come now, don't sulk." What is it they say? Out with the old, in with the new? Laughter cracked the surface. Hollow, thin, but enough to hurt. I looked at my cousin, not with rage, but with patience, and I thought how quickly the small will side, with whatever shadow looks tallest in the fire, My chest tightened, ribs caging something heavier than breath. My heart didn't beat wildly. It slowed. With every word they threw, it slowed more, like calm settling in the eye of a storm. Across my fingertips, a faint tremor betrayed heartbreak I refused to show. For a moment, the chandelier above flickered, the bulbs dimmed, light stretched thin, and then darkness claimed the room for barely a breath. In that half-second of abyss, their faces looked skeletal, eyeless shadows, mouth slits sneering, half revealed by the single candle flame still burning strong. When electricity returned, they blinked it away, pretending nothing was amiss. I alone noticed the foreshadowing. Even the house seemed to suggest what bonds had rotted here. And then it happened. The small symbolic act that sealed the moment in memory forever. A waiter, clumsy from tension, set down a tray too quickly. A champagne glass shattered against the tiles. Sharp echo. Splinters spreading like stars across the floor. The fizz hissed across the cracks, flooding small black veins between tiles. I stared at it, unable not to. Because it was truth. A bond broken. Glass never whole again. Yet no one paused to notice. No one thought symbolic fracture meant anything beyond inconvenience. Napkins hit the spill. Mumbled apologies drifted. My brother chuckled cruelly. Well, fitting, isn't it? As though the broken glass itself took my side of disgrace. But I knew better. Symbols speak to the silent. I pressed my hands gently together, fingers interlacing like prayer. My voice did not rise. You've said enough, I told them. My calm frightened more than anger could have. For a heartbeat, hesitation touched the air. Eyes wavered. A few glanced down as if guilty children might. But my brother leaned farther forward, unwilling to concede dignity back into my hands. No, he hissed, grin widening. We've only begun. It's time you heard the truth. No one here owes you. No one respects what you've done. Years of work, it meant nothing. You gave everything, and look at you. Nothing left. That word again. Nothing. Repeated like a verdict carved on my skin. Inside, sorrow gathered, but fury did not roar. Instead, it sharpened. It hardened. The sorrow, heavy as iron, cooled into clarity. The laughter resumed in fragments. I listened, I watched, I memorized, and I set the memory like stone in a hidden corner of myself. One, I knew time could not erode. The gift box gleamed faint under candlelight. Ribbon catching storm flashes, taunting their blindness. They didn't see it. They didn't sense the truth in waiting silence. Even as another clap of thunder shook the windows, I said nothing. Not nothing from defeat, nothing from choice. Because only one decision mattered that night, and I carved it into my mind with quiet finality. I said nothing. I only decided this much. This will not be forgotten. The clock ticked against my chest. The gift breathed on the table. The storm howled beyond the walls. And all around me sat betrayers who thought their cruelty final. They had no idea what patience, dressed as silence, can become. The night after their laughter had died down, and their words still echoed like ghosts in the corners of my mind, I sat alone. The dining hall had grown cold. Even the storm outside had finally relented, leaving nothing but the occasional drip of rain sliding from the gutters. Silence replaced thunder, but silence is its own kind of storm, one that blooms within you, spreading slowly until it drowns your chest. I lit a single lamp on my desk. Its light was not dazzling. It was yellow and tired, like an old companion that had seen far too much. The glow stretched across scattered pages, envelopes, and leather-bound ledgers. The air smelled faintly of dust, mixed with cold iron from the window frame left ajar. I could still taste the bitterness of champagne I had forced past my lips earlier that evening. Its sweetness long faded into metallic aftertaste. For hours I stared at nothing, my breath fogging slightly in the chill. And though the world around me had quieted, their words roared again in my skull. You've lost everything. You're finished. Nobody respects what you've done. The phrases repeated, sharp as broken glass grinding underfoot. I let them cut. I let them sink. And somewhere between their malice and my silence, I felt myself transform. Pain is a furnace. If left alone, it can consume you. If tended carefully, it hardens you, reshaping every weakness into tempered steel. My hand rested upon the pocket watch. I had worn it that night only as a tether to memory, a relic of someone long gone but not forgotten. My grandfather. The metal was cold, but the ticking inside remained patient. I turned it slowly in my palm, its hinge creaking faintly. And then, for the first time in years, I pressed firmly at the backplate. It clicked, a sound so small, yet thunderous inside my chest. The casing shifted slightly. A compartment I had never known slid open like an eyelid parting. Within it, wedged neatly, yellowed with the weight of passing time, rested a folded slip of paper, no thicker than a letter, no longer than my palm, yet heavier than all insults combined. I unfolded it with hands unusually steady. My eyes traced the handwriting, sharp, distinct script I remembered from countless evenings when my grandfather sat, hunched near lamplight, pen scratching over parchment, while a whiskey glass stood sentry nearby. The letter bore his signature. It was his will, an addendum never spoken aloud nor presented in meetings. It declared his wishes, written in his final years. Not my brother's name, not my father's, not any cousins, mine, ownership, control, succession, every share, every deed, written clearly to fall to me, quietly hidden, quietly preserved, as though he had known whispers of betrayal might drown out his true voice. He entrusted only me, because he must have seen in me what others denied. The ink blurred slightly as my vision wet the page, but I blinked fiercely against tears, not from sentiment alone, but from wrath at the realization. They had known. Or worse, they had hidden it. Beside the letter, in the tiny compartment, glinted a key, brass, weighty despite size, the kind that belonged not to household locks, but to a safe, a vault heavy with truths long concealed. My pulse surged. I searched the study, drawers long untouched, shelves sagging with folders. Dust rose around me as I pulled open an untouched cabinet, and there, beneath yellowed invoices, I found what the key craved. An iron strongbox, discreet enough to seem ordinary but locked tight, patient for discovery. The key fit. The box yielded. Inside, ledgers stained with ink and fingerprints long gone cold. Legal certificates of ownership. Receipts showing money siphoned silently. Pages documenting manipulations I had only felt in gut but never proved. Assets hidden as debts. Signatures forged, figures twisted until truth suffocated. The proof of their betrayal was no longer abstract. It stared at me from every brittle page. I sat straighter. The weight of nights spent bent before their cruelty shifted into precision. The desk lamp hummed, its bulb buzzing faintly, warm upon my face. Shadows stretched across the papers like black veins branching outward across wood. My reflection in the window pane looked alien, tired, lined, but alive with something new. "Resolve," I whispered into the room, voice low so that only the silence bore witness. They buried me already. But they dug too shallow. The hours ahead became rituals. Night after night, while the house slept, I pored through those documents. A watch ticked endlessly beside me, each second a nail in the coffin of their overconfidence. My meals shrank into crusts of bread and cups of bitter tea. My world narrowed down to paper, ink, and revelation. I practiced too, before the small mirror hung on the wall. Practiced speaking with serenity. Tried on the words I knew I would someday need. I imagined their faces across the table, their voices cracking into denial as I presented them truths they could not erase. But I vowed that my voice would remain calm, deliberate, surgically precise. Revenge is not thunder. Revenge is an echo that returns long after they thought the mountains were still. At gatherings thereafter, I sat silent. They flaunted wealth, new suits, louder laughter, reckless gestures. I watched. I memorized. I smiled faintly when their boasts slipped into contradictions, when new purchases betrayed debts hidden beneath showmanship. My silence became their blindfold. They thought me broken, unaware, walking quietly into my own erasure. But I saw everything. I saw the tremor of arrogance in my brother's hand, the cracks in his laughter as creditors began circling. I heard whispers of interest unpaid. And whenever doubt fluttered momentarily in their eyes, I bit my tongue and fed them quiet agreement. Let them remain smug. Let them remain cruel. Every empire collapses best when no one suspects the walls are already shifting. Seasons turned, winter into spring, spring into heavy summer air. My nightly ritual never changed. Desk lamp, stacks of proof, letters in my grandfather's hand, whispering memory into bone. Sleep abandoned me, but purpose filled the gap. Some nights I sat with the documents spread like a fan across the desk, sipping whiskey slow, the heat sinking into my chest. I watched the amber swirl in its glass and imagined the same liquid burning down their throats when truth cornered them mercilessly. One night, as rain streaked down pain once more, I leaned back in my chair and closed the folder gently, hands flat upon the leather cover. The lamp flickered slightly as if it knew closure had arrived. Every number memorized, every letter copied into permanence. Their empire of theft and lies was already undone. The only question was when to show hand. I placed the pocket watch atop the folder, its tick merged with rain steady against the window. My reflection across glass looked foreign, half shadow, half flame. They thought they had buried me, I murmured into the lamp's fading glow. But I was ready, and with that, I turned off the light. Darkness wrapped around me like a cloak, not as an enemy, but as an ally. Secrets live longer there. The house slept unaware, their breaths shallow upstairs, while downstairs, truth ticked silently in silver casing, waiting, patient as me. For in silence, a seed had taken root, a seed they would soon choke upon. The day of reckoning did not arrive with thunder. It came in stillness. It was an evening that mirrored the one they had chosen to humiliate me. The curtains were drawn against the season's dull gray sky. A long dining table stretched once again in polished, suffocating formality. The chandelier above flickered faintly, as if haunted by memory. Its light swayed, golden and tired, over glasses and fork tines that gleamed with nervous anticipation. I had chosen this place deliberately. The stage they had used to brand me finished would now become the same ground for unveiling truth. Fate, I believed, loves symmetry. I remember the first detail clearly, the smell. Rich meats roasting, wine uncorked, sauces warming on silver trays. But beneath it lingered another scent, candle wax melting, that faint bitterness which had lingered the night of my humiliation. The smell was my reminder that time may pass, but wounds wait patiently. I was the last to sit. My chair had been left vacant, waiting. Even before my body touched the wood, I could feel their arrogance pulsing in the air. They thought I had returned beaten, seeking scraps of their approval. They thought my silence in these weeks had been resignation. They were wrong. Conversation stumbled to stillness as I placed a single object on the table, the navy-wrapped gift. Its ribbon still gleamed from that birthday night, untouched, unopened until this moment. It looked almost out of place amid steaming dishes and polished cutlery, but its presence stole all eyes instantly. I let the silence lengthen. My hand did not move from the box. Instead, I straightened my coat, fingers brushing briefly over the pocket watch where it rested, ticking against my chest. That tiny rhythm reminded me, patience has carried you here. Keep steady. My brother smirked first. The same smugness, the same crooked confidence. "What's this? A peace offering?" he said, laughter readying in his throat. The others breathed shallow, waiting. My voice slid through the room, level and deliberate. "No, not a gift for me. A gift for you." I paused, breathing calmly through the weight of their stares. Slowly I began to untie the ribbon, the metallic sheen unfurled with soft friction. A whisper against wood. Their laughter stumbled. Anticipation thickened into unease. Inside, wrapped carefully, lay documents. A leather folder bound tight, flaking slightly with age. I pushed the box forward with both hands, gentle, measured, as though I were not handing them paper, but a judgment engraved in stone. Their eyes darted, confusion, skepticism. My brother leaned forward, pulling the folder free with almost casual disdain. But when he opened it, when his eyes moved across my grandfather's distinct handwriting, his posture shifted, shoulders stiffened, breath caught. The smug grin drained like water slipping down a cracked vase. I spoke, calm, filling their silence. You said I had nothing, that I was finished, cut off. But my grandfather thought differently. He left his word in writing. His wish was clear. His will, undisputed in ink. I let that sink. One sentence, then another, spaced apart with deliberate pause. Time slowed around me. The tick of the watch echoed louder than their shallow breaths. My brother's lips parted, but no words came. His hand trembled slightly against the page. Then finally, This is forged. You're lying. His denial rang too quickly, too desperately. I reached calmly into my coat. From the inner pocket, beneath the reassuring weight of silver watch, I withdrew a second envelope, sealed, stamped. The copy held by the lawyer, who now stood quietly at the room's corner, a man unnoticed until that moment. His presence alone tightened the air. No, I said, not forged. Witnessed, filed, preserved beyond your reach. The lawyer nodded once, expression neutral, as though confirming only what truth demands. The silence broke. My cousin's nervous laugh cracked, brittle. This doesn't change. It changes everything, I interrupted softly. Not shouted, not screamed. Quiet enough that every syllable made heads tilt closer. Father bowed his head into his palm. Mother exhaled sharply but said nothing. Eyes flickering in shame, too late to serve as defense. My brother's fury arrived next, hot, loud, desperate. You think this matters? That's some old man's scribbles? His name carried this family, I cut in. My tone never wavered. The roof over your head, the food in that kitchen, every chair in this room seated you because of him. And his word stands above any of yours. He slammed his palm against the table hard enough that glasses rattled. The champagne fizzed over the rim, hissing along silver stems. His face flushed red, jaws clenched, words spitting out between teeth. No, you can't. We decided. You're nothing. You decided lies, I whispered. He decided truth. The lawyer cleared his throat softly, placing a separate folder atop the table. Legal papers, recorded ownership, deeds. Every share, every estate, marked irrevocably to me. That was the turning knife. The room changed shape in that instant. One moment, it was theirs, filled with their laughter and smug certainty. The next, ownership shifted with the weight of ink. They sat within walls that no longer belonged to them. The fire behind their eyes dimmed like lamps gasping out their final glow. Shock-carved lines across faces once proud. A cousin's fork dropped against porcelain with a metallic clang. Someone's breath caught too loudly. And still, I sat calm, hands folded before me, watch ticking steady at chest. Their arrogance cracked. Sweat gathered along my brother's temple, eyes darting across paper, as though sheer denial might erase words etched in permanent ink. He threw the folder aside finally, voice breaking. This won't stand. I'll fight it. You can, I said gently. But law is not swayed by volume. Noise means little to ink that cannot be undone. His voice faltered, his rage hollowed into dread. He shook his head, muttering half to himself. Impossible. No, it can't. Each sentence dropped weaker than the last. Then came begging. The look in his eyes shifted, anger collapsing into fear. Please, he stammered. You can't. You wouldn't. We're family. And there it was, not arrogance, not mockery, fear. I tilted my head, breathing slow, silence between us heavier than any accusation. Then I said, quiet but sharp enough to cut, family doesn't bury you alive and call it celebration. He lowered his gaze. His lips trembled, no words left to wield. Around him, others shrank. Cousins staying, silent. Parents locked in the unsettling stillness, their shame exposed by their very refusal to intervene. Not one rose to shield him. Not one spoke in defiance. Utensils clattered faintly as someone's hand slipped. Plates cooled. Food no longer smelled of comfort, but of waste. The air itself seemed heavy, like even oxygen refused to support their lies any longer. Thunder outside broke finally, lightning flashing long across windows. For a heartbeat, the whole room bathed in white light, every face pale, hollow, stripped bare. The storm brought truth's echo. I sat in calm shadow again, as light dimmed. I said little else. I didn't need to. Because humiliation works loud, but dignity works in whispers with sharp edges. My silence weighed more than their shouting, and my presence in quiet control crushed every smirk. The Navy gift sat empty now, its true content spilled across the table. Ribbon coiled loose beside trembling hands. And there in that simple object, the one they ignored on my birthday, justice had slept, waiting for the right moment to wake, and now it had woken. I leaned back slightly, a breath drawn not in relief, but in conclusion. My revenge was not to scream louder, nor to break what they loved. It was to sit calmly as their empire of arrogance crumbled under the weight of its own deceit. When my brother slumped back finally, face pale, lips dry, unable to raise even one more protest, I knew it was done. I poured myself a glass of water, the sound of liquid against crystal, echoing in tense silence. I drank slowly, savoring its clarity in my throat. My voice followed, soft but unforgettable. "Do you hear it?" I asked. No one replied. "The silence," I said. "It's the sound of truth filling the space where your lies once lived." No one lifted their head. My watch ticked on. Outside, rain eased. The storm was nearly done. I rose from my chair, leaving papers strewn across table like shattered crowns. As I stepped toward the door, not one dared stop me. Not one dared speak. My voice lingered behind me, just enough to mark the night in memory. This is only the beginning. And with that, I left them in their own collapse. When I stepped out of that house, their house, yet not theirs anymore, the night greeted me differently than it had in years. The storm had passed, and the street lamp glow shimmered against pavement still slick with rain. For the first time in what felt like decades, my chest was not heavy with silence. The quiet outside was not oppressive. It was clean, waiting, almost inviting. The air smelled of wet earth and faint jasmine carried by the night breeze. Droplets still clung to branches, catching the light in fleeting sparks like tiny stars within reach. I breathed them in, slowly, deeply, as though every inhale rinsed away blame I had shouldered for so long. Behind me, the house stood dim, curtains drawn, chatter silenced. My family, once loud, arrogant, and cruel, sat in stunned collapse. Their empire of mockery had ended not with screams, but with paper, ink, and the weight of unbroken silence turned against them. I didn't turn back. For years, I had walked away from that door carrying exhaustion, carrying burdens, carrying secrets of sacrifice that no one saw. Tonight, I walked away empty of burden. My hands for once carried only myself. The sound came then, the softest closure of the door behind me. It clicked shut, gentle but final, a sound more profound than thunder. That was the echo I needed. A house divided by greed sealed against me no longer excluded me. It freed me. I walked slowly toward the street, shoes striking shallow puddles. Ripples spread outward, then stilled into glass again. My reflection wavered in the water, but steadied as I moved on. For the first time, I liked what I saw staring back. The pocket watch pulsed at my chest, steady as ever. It had carried me through storms, its ticking a reminder that silence was not defeat, only preparation. Now, its job was complete. Later, in my own study, I placed the watch reverently into its drawer. No fanfare, just a quiet motion that felt heavier than rituals of triumph. The drawer slid shut with a muted sigh of wood against wood, as though the house itself approved, and with that, my timeline had closed. The years stolen, the sacrifices ignored, the insults carved into my bones, they all receded backward into shadow. Not erased, history does not erase, but transformed, like coal pressed into diamond, pain compacted into patient revenge. I looked back on those countless nights, sleepless, bent over desks, or bent over stoves, delivering warmth to a family that mistook warmth for weakness. I remembered laughter ringing in rooms from which I was excluded. I remembered my own birthdays, candles extinguished in silence, cakes cut too modest to matter. And I smiled softly at the thought. They believed those years meant I was fool enough to keep giving until I had nothing. They never saw what sacrifice does to a person. It forges resolve so steady, it does not burn out. It waits. The storm outside my window cleared further. Clouds dispersed, and in between them, the first faint edge of moonlight broke through. Its glow spilled across my desk, across the leather folder of documents now officially sealed under my name. The light touched my skin too, pale but steady, as if the night itself stooped low to vindicate me. Justice, I realized, did not need fire and fury. It unfolds in whispers, in the flick of a pen, in the click of a lock, in the silence that follows when liars can no longer speak. The community would learn soon enough. News of disinheritance reversed. Word of hidden wills and ownership exposed. Their voices, once loud with pride and dismissal, would become hushed, embarrassed confessions spoken only behind hands. Celebration of their stature would shrink into whispers of scandal. Already, I could imagine my brother walking streets with eyes lowered, faces turning not to honor, but to avoid. Once celebrated names curling into rumors, neighbors trading pity for disdain. Even those who joined in my humiliation would scatter, ashamed of siding with arrogance, toppled into ruin. Loneliness would be their inheritance. For me, peace. Not a triumphant peace, not banner waving or victorious shouting. Just the gentle certainty that truth had prevailed, and silence had been my greatest weapon. I poured myself a glass of whiskey that night, not to numb, but to mark the end. The amber liquid caught the moonlight, flickers running across its surface like liquid fire. Its heat spread quietly through me as I drank, not burning, but steadying. The house breathed around me in calm, no storm, no voices, only the creak of floorboards resting, the sigh of wind settling through half-open shutters, the tick of a clock somewhere in the hall. All sounds of peace, not servitude. I reflected, watching that glass slowly empty, on how patience outlasts greed. Patience turns wounds into strategy, and patience, above all, exposes fraud when noise has long faded. I thought of family, how love had once been my compass, but disrespect had broken the needle. A family without respect eats itself alive. Greed breeds jealousy, jealousy breeds lies, and lies, given time, unravel under their own weight. I had been silent. They mistook silence for weakness. Silence, in truth, was the soil, and seeds grow best beneath soil. I smiled faintly, whispering into the night, truth always surfaces. Greed consumes itself. Dignity survives quietly when noise has died. The whiskey glass emptied, I placed it down gently, the clink against wood echoing clear in the stillness. Outside, rain had stopped completely. Clouds parted into a spread of silver moon, stars scattered wide, the air free of heaviness. I rose, walked to the window, and drew the curtains open. Night air crept softly in, cool against my face, carrying the freshness of earth rinsed clean. The world smelled renewed, unburdened, like my own soul. I inhaled deeply and released it with slow finality. They thought they buried me at my birthday, I said softly, each word honest as breath. Instead, they handed me the soil to plant my revenge. And in the silver wash of moonlight, I let that truth stand, unspoken to any but the night, yet strong enough to outlast eternity.